Right, that happens.
Okay. Today I am refuting the proposition social networking prevents young adults from developing communication skills vital to their future. The advocate's secondary claims are: one, social networking isolates people from human interaction. People won't bother to indulge in what really matters in life because instead spent on social networking. And three, people are slowly becoming apathetic to feeling and emotion due to electronic communication. My response to the claim is that social networking is a new communication means of the future. I'd like to point out that the opponent's main proposition specifically points out young adults. However, her secondary claims all say people, which is not exactly just young adults. Okay, first, secondary claim was social networking isolates people. The advocate uses a quote from UCLA Professor Gary Smalls that stated, "Today's youth may be missing out on experiences that help them develop empathy, understand emotional, and read facial expressions and body language." However, after further research, it was proven that it was not a direct quote from Gary Smalls, but just a simple sentence from the New York Times article, which shows that there is no certainty or assurance from the newspaper reporter that our youth is not developing all the mentioned characteristics, and therefore it's unacceptable evidence. Therefore, social networking does not isolate people from human interaction because people are still interacting, just through a new form of communication that is instant and international. My counterclaim is that social networking connects the entire world in a new way that was impossible before. For example, the BBC World Service article that the advocate uses has a statement from Sheena from Dubai, who lives in Florida, and who said that Facebook connects people more, especially for expats like herself, with family and friends all over the world. Also, Facebook statistics from their site show that about 70% of Facebook users are outside of the United States. Okay. Secondary claim number 2 was people don't spend time on what really matters because of social networking. The opponent presented a statistic from the Kaiser Family Foundation that Americans between the ages of 8 to 18 spend on average of 7.5 hours on some sort of electronic device, which is not only computers but phones, MP3 players, etc. There is no focus on the hours being spent specifically on social networking or any specific electronic device, and therefore it's an insufficient source. Social networking does matter and has great importance in one's life and career because it helps build relationships and knowledge. So my counterclaim is that social networking creates longer lasting and more significant relationships with a wider variety of people and an expansion of the user's mental horizons. An example was on Facebook Wire, the statistics online. It said that the entrepreneurs and developers from more than 190 countries build with Facebook platform. Miles O'Brien from a PBS video stated that multitasking skills gained through social networking are actually greatly used in the job force. And also, it serves as a job industry where many get hired through their showcase talents, like all the YouTube sensations. Or like Sarah Lucy said on TechCrunch.com that her niece, who she will only see once a year, is now helping her map out a family tree. The last secondary claim was people are losing ability to sense emotion and feeling. First, the opponent uses an example from Simone Bach, who was a 42-year-old woman, which makes it an irrelevant example to her main proposition that clearly stated young adults. However, since the rest of the speech is on people, another challenge to her evidence is that Simone Bach had over 1,000 friends on Facebook. And according to Facebook statistics, the average user has 130 friends. And the opponent uses evidence from a BBC World Service article that used the term cyber skepticism, which means the idea that social media is distancing people from reality and each other. The opponent presents her personal reasoning that social networking is making people less human because you can't express emotion through just typing. So does this also refute all written expressions of emotion such as poetry and most literature? By the way, the definition of poetry is the literary work in which in which special intensity is given to the expression of feelings and ideas, based on Yahoo. My counterclaim is that people are not becoming emotionally desensitized just because there is a newly adopted form of communication. For example, Sarah Lucy, again, in her article on TechCrunch, mentions that how Facebook makes her a more considerate friend because now she remembers her friends' birthdays. In conclusion, I understand the panic towards the end of physical social interaction, but social networking connects to the expanding and supporting concepts of our contemporary digital humanity. And like James Gard said in his article on E-Consultancy Digital Marketers United in 2009, email didn't kill the conversation, so why should social networking?
All right, you labeled the main and secondary points pretty clearly. You've got a general challenge on some of the issues. It sounds a little bit vague, and you've got this argument that says basically a lot of the secondary points are being equivocated since the focus was originally on young people, but a lot of the evidence that's being used is not specific to that group, and it just talks about people in general. So that's a reasonable press to be making, and later on I think it shows up in a couple of the examples that you point out. I think it also works well when you come to the end, when you do that summary and talk about how it's just another way in which people are communicating, and you've got the example how email didn't end conversation, and it's unlikely that social networks would do the same sort of thing. I think that's a good comparison to be making there. The issue on the quote on the first point seems to be suggesting that it's the author of the article who made the inference and not the expert that was being quoted there. And I understand that. The question is, though, is the author of the article incorrect in making that inference? And I think that you need to develop an argument a little bit more on that. I did like the fact that you offered some issues about the connectivity that social networks provide. You have the illustration of the connections of the woman from Dubai who's living in Florida and maintaining relations with other people around the world. You had a statistic there that also talked about how frequently people who use Facebook are outside of the country. Transition to the second point was clear. I like the challenge that you had on the evidence, which really is talking about a variety of media and not necessarily social networks, and that includes phones and other kinds of computers and electronic media and all those kinds of things. There's a long counterclaim on some arguments about things that Facebook may do, some benefits that it could provide. I think that part needed to be a little bit sharper. I did kind of get the idea that there were a couple of good examples there, but they needed to be developed a little bit more. And on the third point, that's where you kind of point again to the exceptionalism of the example not fitting into the categories there that the advocate started with. The notion of cyber skepticism, you seem skeptical of the notion of cyber skepticism, and I think that needs to be explained a little bit more. But I did, like I said, think that the exit quote was really effective at summarizing your point. All right, thank you.